8-year-old Emma Rodriguez had always been an adventurous child, but her parents never imagined that her curiosity would lead to one of the most shocking discoveries in their small town's history. On that crisp Saturday morning in October, Emma was playing in the backyard with her golden retriever puppy Max when something unusual caught her attention. The old warehouse at the edge of their neighborhood had been abandoned for years. Local children were warned to stay away from the deteriorating building, but Max had different plans. The energetic puppy suddenly bolted toward the warehouse, his tail wagging furiously as he picked up an unfamiliar scent. Emma called after him, but Max was determined to investigate whatever had captured his attention. As Emma chased her puppy through the tall grass surrounding the warehouse, she noticed that one of the building's side doors was slightly ajar. This was strange because the property owner had always kept the building locked tight. Max squeezed through the opening and Emma reluctantly followed, worried about her beloved pet's safety. Inside the dimly lit warehouse, Emma's eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness. The building smelled musty and forgotten, filled with old machinery and scattered debris. Max was barking excitedly near the back of the building, his sounds echoing off the concrete walls. As Emma made her way toward her puppy, she began to hear something that made her blood run cold. There were voices coming from somewhere deep within the warehouse. Not just any voices, but desperate, pleading sounds that seemed to be coming from below ground level. Emma's heart began racing as she realized these weren't the voices of people who were supposed to be there. These were cries for help, and they sounded weak and frightened. Max had positioned himself near what appeared to be a metal grate in the floor. The puppy was pawing at the opening, whimpering and looking back at Emma as if trying to communicate something urgent. As Emma knelt beside the grate, the voices became clearer, and what she heard next would change everything. Two distinct male voices were calling out from what seemed to be an underground chamber. They were begging for water, for food, for someone to help them. Emma could hear the desperation in their voices, and she realized with growing horror that these people had been trapped down there for some time. The voices were weak, suggesting they hadn't eaten or had proper water in days. Emma's mind raced as she tried to process what she was experiencing. She was just a child, but she understood that she had stumbled upon something terrible. The men below were in serious danger, and she might be their only hope for rescue. But as she listened more carefully to their conversations, she began to pick up details that would soon shock her entire community. Through their desperate exchanges, Emma learned that the trapped men were local police officers. They mentioned their badge numbers, their patrol routes, and details about recent cases they had been working on. This wasn't just a case of people being trapped accidentally. Someone had deliberately imprisoned 2 law enforcement officers in what appeared to be makeshift steel cages beneath the warehouse floor. The realization hit Emma like a physical blow. These weren't criminals or trespassers who had gotten stuck somewhere. These were the very people her parents had taught her to trust and turn to for help. Someone had captured and imprisoned police officers, and now their lives depended on a young girl and her puppy, who had accidentally discovered their prison. As Emma pressed her ear closer to the grate, she could hear one of the officers trying to comfort the other. They spoke about their families, their children, and their hope that someone would find them soon. The officer's voice cracked as he mentioned his daughter's upcoming birthday and how he had promised to take her to the zoo. Emma felt tears streaming down her face as she listened to their pain and fear. Max seemed to sense the gravity of the situation. The usually playful puppy sat quietly beside Emma, occasionally whimpering softly as if he too understood that something terrible was happening just beneath their feet. Emma reached down to pet Max, drawing comfort from his warm presence as she tried to figure out what to do next. The warehouse was isolated, and Emma knew that if she left to get help, it might take too long. The officers sounded weak and dehydrated, and she worried they might not survive much longer without immediate assistance. But she was just a child, and the situation was far beyond anything she had ever imagined facing. As Emma sat in the dusty warehouse, listening to the trapped officers and holding her puppy close, she had no idea that her next decision would not only save 2 lives, but would also uncover a conspiracy that reached deep into her small town's power structure. The choice she was about to make would require courage far beyond her years, and would ultimately expose a web of corruption that had been festering in their community for months. Emma knew she had to act quickly, but her 8-year-old mind struggled to process the enormity of what she had discovered. The trapped officers were growing weaker by the hour, and their voices were becoming more desperate. She could hear one of them coughing violently, and the other was trying to keep his partner conscious by talking about their shared memories and experiences on the police force. Instead of running home immediately, Emma made a decision that would prove crucial to the officer's survival. She remembered the emergency whistle her father had given her for protection, which she always kept in her jacket pocket. Emma began blowing the whistle in a specific pattern she had learned in Girl Scouts, hoping that someone nearby might hear and investigate the sound. Max seemed to understand that Emma needed his help. The intelligent puppy began barking loudly in response to the whistle, creating enough noise to potentially attract attention from anyone within several blocks. Together, the girl and her dog created a distress signal that echoed through the abandoned warehouse district. While maintaining her whistle and bark signal, Emma began talking to the trapped officers through the grate. She told them her name and assured them that help was coming. The relief in their voices was immediate and heartbreaking. Officer James Mitchell, a 15-year veteran of the force, began crying when he heard Emma's young voice promising that she wouldn't leave them. Officer David Park, Mitchell's partner, asked Emma to be very careful and to watch for anyone approaching the warehouse. He explained that whoever had trapped them might return, and Emma could be in serious danger if discovered. This warning sent chills down Emma's spine, but she was determined not to abandon the officers who so desperately needed her help. As Emma continued her rescue efforts, she learned more about how the officers had ended up in their underground prison. They had been investigating reports of suspicious activity at the warehouse when they were ambushed by multiple attackers. The officers had been drugged and awakened to find themselves locked in what appeared to be custom-built steel cages in a basement chamber beneath the warehouse floor. Officers revealed that they had been missing for 3 days, and their families were probably frantic with worry. The police department would have launched a massive search, but the warehouse was outside their usual patrol areas and wouldn't have been an obvious place to look. Without Emma's accidental discovery, the officers might have died before anyone found them. Emma's whistle and Max's barking eventually attracted the attention of Mr. Peterson, an elderly man who lived several blocks away and was out walking his own dog. Peterson had served in the military and recognized the whistle pattern as a distress signal. He quickly made his way toward the sound, bringing his cell phone and a small flashlight. When Peterson arrived at the warehouse, Emma quickly explained the situation. The elderly veteran immediately called 911 while Emma continued talking to the trapped officers, assuring them that help was finally on the way. Peterson was amazed by Emma's composure and quick thinking, later telling reporters that the young girl had remained calm and focused throughout the entire ordeal. Within minutes, the warehouse was surrounded by police cars, fire trucks, and ambulances. Emma guided the rescue teams to the exact location of the underground chamber, and Max refused to leave the spot where he had first detected the officer's presence. The puppy seemed to understand his important role in the rescue operation. The rescue proved more complicated than anyone had anticipated. The steel cages were secured with heavy-duty locks, and the underground chamber had been deliberately designed to be escape-proof. Emergency crews had to use specialized cutting equipment to break through the metal barriers and reach the trapped officers. As the rescue operation unfolded, Emma noticed something that the adults seemed to have missed. She had been watching the crowd of onlookers that had gathered around the warehouse, and she spotted a man who appeared unusually nervous and agitated. While everyone else was focused on the rescue efforts, this man kept looking around anxiously and seemed ready to leave at any moment. Emma's sharp observation skills, honed by her love of detective stories and mystery books, told her that something wasn't right about this particular observer. She tugged on Peterson's sleeve and quietly pointed out the nervous man. Peterson, with his military training, immediately understood Emma's concern and discreetly alerted one of the responding police officers. The nervous man was Harold Briggs, a local businessman who owned several properties in the warehouse district. When the police approached him for routine questioning about his presence at the scene, Briggs became increasingly agitated and defensive. His behavior raised red flags for the experienced officers, who decided to detain him for further questioning. As the trapped officers were finally freed from their underground prison, they were rushed to the hospital for emergency medical treatment. Both men were severely dehydrated and malnourished, but they were conscious and able to speak. Before being loaded into the ambulances, Officer Mitchell managed to thank Emma personally, telling her that she and Max were true heroes who had saved their lives. The rescue had been successful, but Emma's role in the story was far from over. Her keen observation of Harold Briggs had potentially identified a key suspect in the officer's kidnapping, and the investigation was about to take some unexpected turns that would shake the entire community to its core. The interrogation of Harold Briggs quickly revealed information that stunned even the most experienced detectives. Under intense questioning, Briggs broke down and confessed to his involvement in the kidnapping, but his revelations went far beyond what anyone had expected. The businessman claimed he had been forced to participate in the plot against the officers because of threats against his own family. According to Briggs's tearful confession, a group of corrupt individuals had been operating an illegal smuggling operation through several abandoned warehouses in the district. Officers Mitchell and Park had been getting too close to discovering the truth about these activities, so the decision was made to eliminate them permanently. Briggs owned the warehouse where the officers were imprisoned, and he had been coerced into providing access to the building. Emma, who had been allowed to stay at the police station with her parents while giving her statement, overheard parts of Briggs' confession. The young girl was shocked to learn that there were people in her community who would hurt police officers and threaten innocent families. But Emma's sharp mind was already working on the inconsistencies she noticed in Briggs' story. Detective Sarah Chen, who was leading the investigation, was impressed by Emma's detailed observations and her ability to remember specific details about the rescue scene. Chen decided to include Emma in parts of the investigation process, recognizing that the young girl's unique perspective might provide valuable insights that adult investigators could miss. Emma told Detective Chen about other things she had noticed during the rescue that seemed strange. She had seen a black sedan parked several blocks away from the warehouse, and the driver had been watching the rescue operation through binoculars. When the police cars arrived, the sedan had quickly driven away. Emma had memorized part of the license plate number, demonstrating the kind of attention to detail that impressed the seasoned detective. Max had also exhibited unusual behavior during the rescue that Emma found significant. Her normally friendly puppy had growled and shown his teeth when certain people approached the warehouse area. Emma trusted Max's instincts about people, and she was convinced that her dog had detected something threatening about specific individuals in the crowd. Detective Chen ran the partial license plate number that Emma had provided, and the results were disturbing. The vehicle was registered to Marcus Webb, a local city councilman who had been vocal about supporting law enforcement in public, but had been quietly opposing increased police funding for anti-corruption investigations. Webb's involvement suggested that the conspiracy reached into the highest levels of local government. The investigation team decided to place Webb under surveillance while they gathered more evidence. Emma's parents were initially reluctant to allow their daughter to remain involved in such a dangerous situation, but Detective Chen convinced them that Emma's unique observations could be crucial to solving the case and preventing future attacks on law enforcement. Officers Emma and Max were given a special role as unofficial consultants to the investigation. Detective Chen arranged for them to visit various locations around town, while being discreetly protected by undercover officers. The goal was to see if Emma and Max could identify other suspicious activities or individuals connected to the conspiracy. During one of these supervised outings, Emma and Max visited the downtown area where several city government buildings were located. Max immediately became agitated when they passed the building that housed Councilman Webb's office. The puppy began barking and pulling toward a particular entrance, suggesting that he recognized scents associated with the people who had been involved in the officer's kidnapping. Emma also noticed that Webb's office building had a delivery truck parked behind it that looked identical to vehicles she had seen near the warehouse district on several occasions. She quietly pointed this out to the undercover officer who was accompanying them, and photographs were taken for further investigation. The surveillance of Councilman Webb began producing results within days. Investigators observed him meeting with known criminals and exchanging briefcases in secluded locations. Phone taps revealed conversations about moving operations to different locations and eliminating witnesses who might threaten their smuggling network. Most shocking of all, the investigation revealed that Webb had been working with a network of corrupt officials who had been stealing money from city budgets and using abandoned properties to store and distribute illegal goods. The kidnapped officers had stumbled upon evidence of this corruption during their routine patrols, and their elimination had been ordered to protect the entire criminal enterprise. Emma's role in uncovering this conspiracy had grown far beyond what anyone could have imagined when she first followed Max into that abandoned warehouse. Her observations and Max's instincts had not only saved 2 officers' lives, but had also exposed a web of corruption that had been stealing from the community for years. Detective Chen knew that Emma's continued involvement might be dangerous, but the young girl's insights were proving invaluable to the investigation. As the case developed, it became clear that even more shocking revelations were yet to come, and Emma's courage would be tested in ways that no child should ever have to face. The community was beginning to learn about Emma's heroic actions, and support was pouring in from across the region, but Emma remained focused on making sure that justice was served, and that no other police officers would be harmed by the criminals who had been hiding in plain sight within their local government. The investigation took a dangerous turn when Detective Chen received threatening phone calls, warning her to stop digging into the warehouse incident. The threats were specific and detailed, indicating that whoever was behind the corruption network knew exactly what evidence the police had gathered and how close they were to making additional arrests. Emma's parents became increasingly worried about their daughter's safety when they learned about the threats against Detective Chen. They requested police protection for their family, and undercover officers were stationed around their home 24 hours a day. Despite the danger, Emma remained determined to help solve the case and bring the criminals to justice. Max had become something of a celebrity in the police department, with officers bringing him treats and toys whenever Emma visited the station. But the intelligent puppy seemed to understand the seriousness of the situation and remained alert and protective whenever they were in public. Emma noticed that Max had developed the ability to sense danger before she could detect it herself, and she learned to trust his warnings completely. During a family trip to the grocery store, Max suddenly became agitated and began growling at a man shopping in the produce section. Emma immediately alerted their protective detail, and the man was discreetly followed when he left the store. The surveillance revealed that he was Thomas Reed, the warehouse district's unofficial security coordinator, who had been reporting the movements of potential witnesses to the corruption network. Reed's capture led to another breakthrough in the case. Under interrogation, he revealed that the conspiracy involved not just city officials and criminals, but also several members of the local police force who had been paid to look the other way when suspicious activities occurred in certain areas of town. This revelation devastated the honest officers who had been working tirelessly to solve the case. Emma was heartbroken to learn that some police officers had betrayed their fellow officers and their community. She had always been taught to trust and respect law enforcement, and the discovery of corruption within the police force challenged her understanding of right and wrong. Detective Chen spent time explaining to Emma that most officers were honest and dedicated, but that a few bad individuals could cause serious harm. The corrupt police officers had been feeding information to the criminal network, which explained how the conspiracy had been able to operate for so long without being detected. They had also been responsible for misdirecting investigations and ensuring that honest officers like Mitchell and Park were assigned to areas where they might discover incriminating evidence. Emma's detailed memory of the rescue scene proved crucial. Once again, when she remembered seeing one of the responding officers behaving strangely during the warehouse operation, Officer Kevin Murphy had arrived with the rescue team, but had spent most of his time away from the actual rescue site, making phone calls and seeming more interested in who was present than in helping free the trapped officers. When Detective Chen confronted Murphy with Emma's observations and other evidence that had been gathered, the corrupt officer's facade crumbled. He confessed to his involvement in the conspiracy and provided detailed information about how the network operated. Murphy's revelations led to the identification of 2 additional corrupt officers and several more civilian conspirators. The scope of the corruption was staggering. The network had been stealing city funds designated for public works projects, using abandoned properties for illegal storage and distribution operations, and intimidating or eliminating anyone who threatened to expose their activities. They had planned to kill Officers Mitchell and Park after keeping them imprisoned long enough to extract information about what evidence they had gathered. Emma learned that her discovery of the trapped officers had prevented not only their murders but also the planned expansion of the criminal network into other communities. The conspirators had been preparing to replicate their operation in neighboring towns, potentially corrupting law enforcement and government officials across the entire region. As more arrests were made, Emma began receiving letters and gifts from grateful community members who appreciated her courage and determination. The local newspaper wanted to interview her, and television stations from nearby cities requested permission to tell her story. Emma's parents were careful to protect their daughter's privacy, while allowing her to understand the positive impact of her actions. Max also received recognition for his role in the rescue, with the police department presenting him with an honorary K9 badge and declaring him an official friend of law enforcement. The puppy seemed to enjoy the attention, but remained focused on his protective duties whenever Emma was in potentially dangerous situations. The investigation was nearing its conclusion, but Detective Chen warned Emma and her family that the most dangerous phase might be yet to come. With so many arrests and the network's operations severely disrupted, the remaining conspirators might become desperate and unpredictable. The final confrontation would test Emma's courage one more time and would ultimately determine whether justice would truly be served. Emma had grown from a curious 8-year-old into a young person who understood the importance of standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult or dangerous. Her partnership with Max had evolved into something special, and together they had become symbols of hope and integrity for their entire community. 6 months after the trials concluded, Emma's life had settled into a new routine, but the impact of her heroic actions continued to ripple through the community in unexpected ways. The police department had implemented new anti-corruption measures inspired by Emma's case, including citizen oversight committees and anonymous reporting systems that made it easier for honest officers to report suspicious behavior by their colleagues. Officers, Mitchell and Park, had become close family friends of the Rodriguez family, often visiting for dinner and sharing stories about their police work with Emma. Both men credited their experience in the steel cages with giving them a deeper appreciation for their families and their duty to serve the community honestly. They established a mentorship program for young people interested in law enforcement careers. Emma had decided that she wanted to become a detective when she grew up, inspired by her work with Detective Chen during the investigation. Chen had become something of a mentor to Emma, teaching her about critical thinking, observation skills, and the importance of gathering evidence before drawing conclusions. These lessons proved valuable in Emma's schoolwork and her interactions with other children. Max had grown from a playful puppy into a confident, young dog who seemed to understand his special role in the community. He accompanied Emma to school events and community gatherings, where children and adults alike enjoyed hearing about his part in the rescue operation. The dog's calm, friendly demeanor made him an excellent ambassador for the positive relationship between citizens and law enforcement. The warehouse district had been completely transformed following the investigation. The city government, now purged of corrupt officials, had invested in renovating the abandoned buildings and creating a community center where Emma volunteered as a reading tutor for younger children. The site where she had discovered the trapped officers was marked with a small memorial garden dedicated to integrity and courage. Emma's story had attracted national attention, leading to invitations to speak at law enforcement conferences and community safety events across the country. Her parents carefully managed these opportunities, ensuring that Emma could share her message about civic responsibility without being overwhelmed by the attention or missing important parts of her childhood. The scholarship fund established in Emma's name had grown substantially, allowing multiple students each year to pursue education and training in criminal justice, social work, and community service fields. Emma participated in the selection process, meeting with applicants and helping to identify young people who demonstrated the kind of character and commitment that could make a positive difference in their communities. Detective Chen had been promoted to lieutenant, partly based on her excellent handling of the corruption case, and she credited Emma's involvement as a key factor in the investigation's success. Chen now traveled to other departments to train officers on how to work effectively with civilian witnesses and informants, using Emma's case as a model for community police cooperation. The federal government had taken notice of the innovative approaches used in Emma's case. and Agent Santos had been assigned to develop new protocols for protecting young witnesses in complex criminal investigations. The procedures developed for Emma's situation became standard practice for similar cases across the country, ensuring that other children could safely contribute to important investigations. Emma's school had established a Good Citizen Award program inspired by her example, recognizing students who demonstrated courage, integrity, and community service. Emma served on the selection committee along with teachers and community leaders, helping to identify classmates who exemplified the values that had driven her own heroic actions. The relationship between the police department and the community had been fundamentally changed by Emma's story. Trust that had been damaged by the revelation of corruption was slowly being rebuilt through transparency initiatives and community engagement programs. Officers now regularly visited schools and neighborhood events, sharing their stories and encouraging citizens to be active partners in maintaining public safety. Emma had learned to balance her role as a local hero with her desire to be a normal child. She enjoyed playing with friends, participating in school activities, and spending time with Max without constantly being reminded of the dramatic events that had brought her fame. Her parents worked hard to ensure that she remained grounded and focused on her education and personal development. The anniversary of the warehouse rescue had become an annual community celebration, with ceremonies honoring not only Emma and Max, but also the honest police officers who had worked tirelessly to expose the corruption network. The event served as a reminder of what citizens and law enforcement could accomplish when they worked together toward common goals. As Emma approached her 9th birthday, she reflected on how much her life had changed since that October morning when Max had led her to the warehouse. She had learned that being a hero wasn't about seeking attention or recognition, but about doing what was right when it mattered most, regardless of personal risk or inconvenience. The investigation took a dangerous turn when Detective Chen received threatening phone calls, warning her to stop digging into the warehouse incident. The threats were specific and detailed, indicating that whoever was behind the corruption network knew exactly what evidence the police had gathered and how close they were to making additional arrests. Emma's parents became increasingly worried about their daughter's safety when they learned about the threats against Detective Chen. They requested police protection for their family, and undercover officers were stationed around their home 24 hours a day. Despite the danger, Emma remained determined to help solve the case and bring the criminals to justice. Max had become something of a celebrity in the police department, with officers bringing him treats and toys whenever Emma visited the station. But the intelligent puppy seemed to understand the seriousness of the situation and remained alert and protective whenever they were in public. Emma noticed that Max had developed the ability to sense danger before she could detect it herself, and she learned to trust his warnings completely. During a family trip to the grocery store, Max suddenly became agitated and began growling at a man shopping in the produce section. Emma immediately alerted their protective detail, and the man was discreetly followed when he left the store. The surveillance revealed that he was Thomas Reed, the warehouse district's unofficial security coordinator, who had been reporting the movements of potential witnesses to the corruption network. Reed's capture led to another breakthrough in the case. Under interrogation, he revealed that the conspiracy involved not just city officials and criminals, but also several members of the local police force who had been paid to look the other way when suspicious activities occurred in certain areas of town. This revelation devastated the honest officers who had been working tirelessly to solve the case. Emma was heartbroken to learn that some police officers had betrayed their fellow officers and their community. She had always been taught to trust and respect law enforcement, and the discovery of corruption within the police force challenged her understanding of right and wrong. Detective Chen spent time explaining to Emma that most officers were honest and dedicated, but that a few bad individuals could cause serious harm. The corrupt police officers had been feeding information to the criminal network, which explained how the conspiracy had been able to operate for so long without being detected. They had also been responsible for misdirecting investigations and ensuring that honest officers like Mitchell and Park were assigned to areas where they might discover incriminating evidence. Emma's detailed memory of the rescue scene proved crucial. Once again, when she remembered seeing one of the responding officers behaving strangely during the warehouse operation, Officer Kevin Murphy had arrived with the rescue team, but had spent most of his time away from the actual rescue site. making phone calls and seeming more interested in who was present than in helping free the trapped officers. When Detective Chen confronted Murphy with Emma's observations and other evidence that had been gathered, the corrupt officer's facade crumbled. He confessed to his involvement in the conspiracy and provided detailed information about how the network operated. Murphy's revelations led to the identification of 2 additional corrupt officers and several more civilian conspirators. The scope of the corruption was staggering. The network had been stealing city funds designated for public works projects, using abandoned properties for illegal storage and distribution operations, and intimidating or eliminating anyone who threatened to expose their activities. They had planned to kill Officers Mitchell and Park after keeping them imprisoned long enough to extract information about what evidence they had gathered. Emma learned that her discovery of the trapped officers had prevented not only their murders but also the planned expansion of the criminal network into other communities. The conspirators had been preparing to replicate their operation in neighboring towns, potentially corrupting law enforcement and government officials across the entire region. As more arrests were made, Emma began receiving letters and gifts from grateful community members who appreciated her courage and determination. The local newspaper wanted to interview her, and television stations from nearby cities requested permission to tell her story. Emma's parents were careful to protect their daughter's privacy, while allowing her to understand the positive impact of her actions. Max also received recognition for his role in the rescue, with the police department presenting him with an honorary K9 badge and declaring him an official friend of law enforcement. The puppy seemed to enjoy the attention, but remained focused on his protective duties whenever Emma was in potentially dangerous situations. The investigation was nearing its conclusion, but Detective Chen warned Emma and her family that the most dangerous phase might be yet to come. With so many arrests and the network's operations severely disrupted, the remaining conspirators might become desperate and unpredictable. The final confrontation would test Emma's courage one more time and would ultimately determine whether justice would truly be served. Emma had grown from a curious 8-year-old into a young person who understood the importance of standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult or dangerous. Her partnership with Max had evolved into something special, and together they had become symbols of hope and integrity for their entire community. 2 years after the warehouse incident, Emma Rodriguez had become a symbol of hope and integrity not just in her hometown, but across the nation. Now 10 years old, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced extraordinary challenges and emerged stronger. Max, now fully grown and magnificently trained, remained her constant companion and the embodiment of loyalty and courage. The impact of Emma's actions had created lasting changes throughout the region. 3 neighboring counties had implemented new transparency measures in their local governments, directly inspired by the reforms that followed Emma's discovery of the corruption network. These changes had prevented similar criminal enterprises from taking root and had restored public trust in local institutions. Emma's relationship with Officers Mitchell and Park had evolved into something resembling that of an honorary little sister. Both men had been promoted within the department, and they often consulted with Emma when working on cases that involved community outreach or youth engagement. Their experience being rescued by a child had given them unique insights into the valuable perspectives that young people could bring to law enforcement challenges. The police department had established the Emma Rodriguez Community Partnership Program, which trained officers to work more effectively with civilian witnesses and informants of all ages. The program had been adopted by law enforcement agencies in 15 states, creating a model for community policing that emphasized collaboration and mutual respect between officers and the citizens they served. Max had officially been certified as a therapy dog and now spent several hours each week visiting hospitals, nursing homes, and schools throughout the region. His gentle nature and remarkable intuition made him particularly effective at providing comfort to children who had experienced trauma or were facing difficult circumstances. Emma often accompanied Max on these visits, sharing her story of courage and resilience with young people who needed inspiration. Detective Chen, now Captain Chen, had written a book about the warehouse case that became required reading at police academies across the country. The book detailed how Emma's fresh perspective and Max's instincts had provided crucial breakthroughs that experienced investigators had missed. Chen continued to mentor Emma, helping her develop the analytical and leadership skills that would serve her well in whatever career she ultimately chose. Emma's academic performance had flourished as a result of her experiences during the investigation. Her enhanced observation skills, critical thinking abilities, and confidence in speaking with adults had made her an outstanding student and a natural leader among her peers. She had been elected class president for 2 consecutive years and had organized several successful community service projects. The scholarship fund established in Emma's name had provided educational opportunities for over 50 young people, many of whom had gone on to careers in law enforcement, social work, and public service. Emma participated in annual scholarship ceremonies, meeting with recipients and encouraging them to use their education to make positive differences in their communities. Emma's parents had been approached by literary agents and film producers interested in telling their daughter's story, but they had carefully limited these opportunities to ensure that Emma's privacy and normal childhood development remained protected. They had agreed to one carefully produced documentary that focused on the importance of civic engagement and community cooperation rather than sensationalizing the dramatic rescue. The warehouse where Emma had discovered the trapped officers had been converted into a community center that housed after-school programs, job training initiatives, and neighborhood watch coordination. A bronze plaque near the entrance commemorated Emma's courage and reminded visitors that ordinary citizens could accomplish extraordinary things when they chose to act with integrity and determination. Emma had developed a particular interest in forensic science and criminal psychology, subjects that she pursued through advanced reading and special programs at the local university. Professor Janet Williams, who taught criminology courses, had become another mentor to Emma, helping her understand the academic foundations of the detective work that fascinated her. Max's role in the rescue had led to increased interest in training dogs for search and rescue operations. The local fire department had established a K-9 unit specifically for finding trapped or missing persons, and Max had helped train several of the dogs that now served in this capacity. His legacy was being carried forward by a new generation of heroic animals. The corruption scandal that Emma had helped expose had resulted in permanent changes to state laws governing local government, transparency, and accountability. The Emma Rodriguez Act required regular audits of municipal contracts and mandated citizen oversight of police departments, creating safeguards that would prevent similar corruption networks from operating in the future. As Emma looked toward her future, she remained committed to the values that had guided her actions during those frightening but important days when she was 8 years old. She understood that heroism wasn't about seeking recognition or reward, but about having the courage to do what was right when faced with difficult choices. Emma and Max continued to visit the memorial garden at the community center regularly, not to relive past glories, but to remind themselves of the responsibility that came with their unique experience. They had learned that being heroes meant dedicating their lives to serving others and protecting the values that made their community strong. The young girl who had followed her puppy into an abandoned warehouse had grown into a confident, compassionate young woman who understood that real courage meant standing up for justice, even when it was difficult or dangerous. Emma Rodriguez and Max had proven that heroes come in all ages and sizes, and that the most important qualities for making a difference in the world were not strength or experience, but rather integrity, compassion, and the willingness to act when action was needed. Emma's story had become a powerful reminder that extraordinary moments often arose from ordinary circumstances, and that the choice to help others in their time of need could create ripple effects that transformed entire communities. The 8-year-old girl who had simply been chasing her puppy had inadvertently become a catalyst for positive change that would continue influencing her hometown for generations to come. On quiet evenings, Emma would often sit in her backyard with Max, looking toward the community center that had once been an abandoned warehouse filled with danger and despair. The transformation of that space into a place of hope and opportunity symbolized everything that Emma had learned about the power of ordinary people to create extraordinary change. Max would rest his head on Emma's lap during these reflective moments, and she would run her fingers through his golden fur while thinking about the journey they had shared together. Neither of them could have imagined on that crisp October morning 2 years earlier how profoundly their adventure would change not only their own lives, but the lives of countless others in their community. Emma knew that her future would likely bring new challenges and opportunities to make a difference in the world. Whether she became a detective, a lawyer, a teacher, or pursued any other career, she was determined to carry forward the lessons she had learned about courage, integrity, and the importance of standing up for what was right. Max would be beside her every step of the way, just as he had been from the very beginning of their remarkable journey together. The bond between the young woman and her faithful companion had been forged in moments of danger and uncertainty, but it had been strengthened by years of shared service to their community. Together, Emma Rodriguez and Max had proven that heroes weren't born with special powers or extraordinary abilities, but were created through the choices they made when faced with the opportunity to help others in need. Their story would continue to inspire future generations of young people to believe in their own capacity to make a positive difference in the world, no matter how young they might be or how impossible the challenges might seem. Emma and Max had shown that sometimes the most powerful force for change was simply a brave heart, a loyal friend, and the determination to do what was right when it mattered most.